6:38, Big 550 KTRS. Maggie Crane, who is spokesperson for Mayor Slay, says that Mayor Slay is in favor of a $15 an hour minimum wage. Mayor Slay hasn't been quoted as saying it, but he's too busy doing all sorts of other things. But he wants $15 an hour minimum wage. Kansas City's talking about it. Other states are doing it. California wants to do it. Just the good, the bad, and the ugly. David Jackson is with us, managing partner with the Gateway Group. He's a lobbyist for the National Restaurant Association. Good morning, David Jackson.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Why not? Sounds like a great idea. $15 a person. They'll have all that money to spend, and it'll be great for business.
You know, I think we all want the same thing. We want a vibrant, active downtown with more jobs and the economy circulating. You know, I lived downtown for several years, and my parents grew up here. My dad grew up on Shaw, and we all want that same outcome. The problem is the minimum wage hike doesn't get us there, and there's two main problems. One, it's not feasible. St. Louis doesn't have the authority under state law to increase the minimum wage above state law. Secondly, it doesn't solve the problem. The result that we've seen through history is going to be you're going to have higher prices on menu items or business costs, and you're going to have fewer hours for those low-wage employees.
All right, first let's talk about the actual legal side of this. You saying that the city of St. Louis has no, as we say, controlling legal authority to raise the minimum wage for their own being?
Correct. So the state legislature and the courts have said multiple times that St. Louis or Kansas City, any city in state law, does not have the authority to increase the minimum wage above the state or federal level. And this has been challenged. The only scenario where St. Louis City has been able to do this is for businesses that have a contract with the city. Mm-hmm. So if you have, maybe you contract out for trash services or any service with the city, then you have some say over what type of benefits those employees get. But for the private sector, you simply can't do it. And it's in multiple different chapters in state statutes.
So the city could say that anybody who is serving lunch to aldermen must pay their workers X amount of dollars if it's being paid for by city funds or whatever, so on and so forth.
Correct. And state law trumps city law at any point. And the state law clearly gives them the ability to pay the $7.65 minimum wage.
Has anybody brought this up to Maggie Crane?
You know, actually, Kansas City, as you mentioned, is doing the same thing and looking at this increase. And there was another piece of pending legislation this year to reinforce the intent of the legislature. And the Kansas City city attorney issued a memo clearly stating 3 different reasons that Kansas City did not have the authority to increase the minimum wage.
That aside, though, what's the fear from the NRA to raise the minimum wage? I mean, these people are living near...
The NRA being the National Restaurant Association, not the National Rifle Association.
The other NRA, yes. People are living near poverty level. These are hardworking people. They deserve a $15 an hour raise or even $10. I don't understand.
You know, my client wants employees to earn as much as they can and get the best growth we can for the St. Louis city. And the big problem is that when you raise the price on employment, you get less of it. And we already have a problem in St. Louis, in the structure of St. Louis, that we're not well suited to sustain a $15 minimum wage. We already see evidence of businesses moving to Clayton or Kirkwood or Webster Groves because of, say, the earnings tax or maybe other reasons. And we're worried if you increase that minimum wage to $15 an hour, you're just going to force businesses out. Or like I said, you're going to hire less people or make people work fewer hours. What we really need is more businesses moving into St. Louis, offering more hours and hiring more people.
Well, some businesses. We're talking, you know, the big restaurants, McDonald's, the big chains. That's not going to be any skin off their back.
You know what you could see if you raise the minimum wage, you're going to see elimination or, you know, higher menu prices, maybe limited dollar menu or no dollar menu items. You're going to see you're already paying a high value or high dollar for a beer at a Cardinals game. Imagine what that would be if you're hiking from $7.65 to $15 an hour.
But we don't know that's going to be true if they're going to actually raise the prices.
The money has to come from somewhere, you know, and I think all of us here...
They have the money already, though.
All of us here would agree that if we took a poll, we would all love a pay increase. And the problem is, though, that money has to come from somewhere. And if you are a business, you're going to have to either raise your menu items and raise your prices to your customers, hire less people, or require the people that are already working to cover more responsibilities or automate certain things. And there's a variety of consequences and trade-offs.
Throw the Cardinals out, because the Cardinals that's an outlier, because normally you wouldn't pay $8 for a bottle of water. So that's a different world. But the $15 an hour, or the whatever the minimum wage is, the argument is that you can't live on a minimum wage. How many people are actually living on a minimum wage, and how many people are college kids, how many people are entry level, and how long are these people on this minimum wage before the employer actually starts to give them their own raise?
Yeah, I think that's a good point in looking at the intent of the minimum wage and how many people are surviving on that. And I think you see plenty of examples in St. Louis where restaurants or small businesses that are paying their employees a higher wage than minimum wage right now to retain them. Because sometimes if you stick to that minimum wage, you're going to have employees that, say in the restaurant business, may jump around in high turnover because they're going to find where they get the best tips. But in this scenario, someone right now who's paying, overcompensating their employees for maybe $12 an hour, now all of a sudden they're going to have to raise the $20 an hour. And so you create a shift. And I think the big fact and point here is that I don't think you help those people you're trying to help by raising the minimum wage. We haven't seen any results. If you look at Oakland, they just did the same thing and raised it to, I think, around $12 an hour. And
tell that to a woman, though, who is raising a family that's raising a couple of kids off $8 an hour, that raising it to $15 an hour is not helping them.
Again, I think the money has to come from somewhere. And let's take a scenario where if you're renting an apartment and all of a sudden your price increases at your apartment, by 50%. The first thing you're going to do is start looking where else you can rent. And it's the same thing for businesses. If you can't withhold that cost, you're going to look and see where else you can move or how you can cut your costs, where you can raise your menu items. And I don't think that we're helping the people we're trying to help.
Let's talk about this on the politics side of it. It's very popular. Democrats have known this. So they put these ballot initiatives on the ballot so that it gets their people out. And in recent memory, I can't think of a ballot initiative where the minimum wage was on the ballot and it didn't pass overwhelmingly. So it's very popular.
I think it goes back to the point. And anytime you put something in a poll, you have to make sure you look at the trade-offs. And so if you polled those same people and asked them if they want higher prices for different menu items, or if they thought that this would impact and cause more businesses to move to the surrounding collar areas of St. Louis, I think you would see those results as well. And again, back to what I said earlier, if all of us took a vote, we would all probably vote to raise our own pay as well. But again, that money has to come from somewhere. And when you look at St. Louis, imagine if you didn't have a uniform minimum wage at a state level and you had 92 different minimum wages in St. Louis County. That would be a disaster. And because you're going to have so much conflict between municipality to municipality that the purpose of the minimum wage is to be set at the state level in a state decision.
Yeah, well, we have that with taxes and sales taxes, and that's why everyone's fighting when giving each other TIF money to put the Walmart on their side of the street as opposed to the other side of the street.
I agree.
In terms of, people keep talking about raising it $3 or $4 or $5, but the employee gets that raise, but the employer pays more in taxes. Right? So if you get a $5 an hour raise, the employer's paying like $7 an hour more because there are taxes affiliated with that.
Correct.
Which I think people have to pay attention to as well.
Correct.
Yeah. All right.
And I think on the restaurant level, you have 1 in 5 businesses that survive after 5 years of being open. 1 in 2 fail in their first year. And so it's very hard. And we all see the empty storefronts in St. Louis City for different restaurants. It's a hard business to make it in. And we want to create an environment that encourages a more vibrant economy with more restaurants and more small business.
David Jackson is a lobbyist for the National Restaurant Association, talking about $15 an hour minimum wage. Interesting conversation as always. David, thanks for checking in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You got it, 8:47.